During the divorce trial, my 9-year-old showed the judge a video. My ex-husband's lawyer stood up and left the courtroom without a word. Let me back up, because what happened that day was the end of something that started 8 months earlier, when Darian looked at me across our kitchen table and said he wanted a divorce. After 8 years of marriage. Just like that. My name is Sienna. I'm a freelance photographer. Was a freelance photographer back when I still believed my life made sense. I worked part-time so I could be home for our daughter Ivy after school. Darian was a financial consultant, made good money. We had a nice house in the suburbs outside Charlotte. I thought we were happy. I was wrong about a lot of things. When Darian asked for the divorce, he didn't just want out of the marriage, he wanted custody of Ivy, full custody. And he wanted everything else too, the house, the savings, all of it. He called me an inadequate wife and a failed mother. Those were his exact words. I remember because they're the kind of words that burn themselves into your memory. I didn't understand how he could say that. I'd spent 9 years caring for our daughter, building our home, supporting his career, but he had a lawyer, a sharp one in an expensive suit, and apparently he had evidence. Evidence I didn't even know existed. The preliminary hearing was brutal. His lawyer presented bank statements showing I'd been spending recklessly, credit card bills for things I didn't remember buying, photos of our house in complete chaos, dishes piled up, laundry everywhere, toys scattered across every surface. Darian testified that I'd become depressed, unstable, unable to care for Ivy properly. I tried to explain. The spending? Darian had access to everything. Those charges could have been anyone. The messy house? I'd been sick with the flu for a week. Of course, things got out of hand. But my court-appointed lawyer was drowning in cases, and I sounded defensive, desperate. Darian, meanwhile, looked calm, concerned, like a devoted father worried about his daughter's well-being. And Ivy? She was confused, scared. Darian had started buying her things. Expensive things. A new iPad. Designer clothes. He promised her a trip to Disney World. She was 9 years old. She didn't understand what was happening, just that suddenly everything felt wrong and Daddy was being really, really nice. I could feel her slipping away from me, and I had no idea how to stop it. This is a long story, and I'm going to need you with me to tell it right. If you want to hear how a broken tablet and a brave little girl brought down a conspiracy, stay close. You won't want to miss what happens next. The custody hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks after the preliminary. 6 weeks of Darian playing the perfect father, while I scrambled to prove I wasn't the disaster he'd painted me to be. I got a part-time job at a portrait studio. Started documenting everything. Every meal I cooked for Ivy, every homework session, every bedtime story. I kept the house spotless. I was trying to be the perfect mother, which is exactly what you do when someone's trying to prove you're not. But Darian was always one step ahead. 2 weeks before the hearing, his lawyer filed new documents. They were bringing in an expert witness, a child psychologist named Dr. Camille Torres. According to her credentials, she had a PhD from Duke, 15 years of experience, and specialized in custody evaluations. My lawyer barely glanced at the filing. He had 3 other cases that week. The day of the hearing, I wore my best dress, the navy one I'd worn to my cousin's wedding. I wanted to look stable, put together, like a good mother. Darian wore a suit that probably cost more than my car payment. He didn't look at me once. His lawyer called Dr. Torres to the stand first thing. She was beautiful. Early 30s, dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, burgundy suit that screamed competence. She carried a leather portfolio and smiled warmly at the judge before taking her seat. Her credentials were impeccable. The judge seemed impressed before she'd even opened her mouth. Dr. Torres, Darian's lawyer began, you've conducted a psychological evaluation of the minor child in this case. Is that correct? Yes, I have. Over the course of 4 sessions with Ivy Brennan. 4 sessions. I'd never heard of any sessions, never signed any release forms, never even met this woman. I leaned toward my lawyer. I don't know her, I whispered. Ivy never saw a psychologist. He patted my hand. We'll address it in cross-examination. But Dr. Torres had an answer for everything. The sessions had been conducted with Darian's consent during his custody time. Perfectly legal. She had documentation, intake forms, session notes, even drawings Ivy had supposedly made during their meetings. And what were your findings, Dr. Torres? She looked at me then. Her eyes were soft, sympathetic. pitying. Ivy is a sweet, intelligent child who loves both her parents. However, she exhibits signs of anxiety that appear to stem from instability in her mother's home. During our sessions, she expressed concern about her mother's emotional state. She mentioned that Ms. Brennan often cries, that the house is frequently chaotic, that she feels she needs to take care of her mother rather than the other way around. My chest tightened. None of that was true. Yes, I'd cried. My husband had just blown up our life, but Ivy had never had to take care of me. Never. In your professional opinion, Dr. Torres, what custody arrangement would serve Ivy's best interests? I believe Ivy would thrive in a stable, structured environment. Mr. Brennan has demonstrated the ability to provide that. Ms. Brennan clearly loves her daughter, but she's emotionally incapacitated right now. Perhaps supervised visitation while she seeks treatment. The words hit me like a physical blow. Supervised visitation, like I was dangerous. Dr. Torres stepped down from the stand. As she walked past the plaintiff's table, heading back to her seat behind Darian's lawyer, I caught it. Amber and vanilla. The scent was distinctive, expensive, and sickeningly familiar. 3 months earlier, before Darian asked for the divorce, he'd come home late from work. I'd hugged him, and his shirt had smelled like perfume. Not my perfume. When I'd asked about it, he'd gotten defensive. Said a colleague had hugged him goodbye at a retirement party. I'd believed him because I'd had no reason not to. That perfume, that exact scent. I watched Dr. Torres sit down, watched the way she glanced at Darian. Just for a second, and the way his jaw tightened slightly before he looked away. She wasn't just an expert witness, she was his mistress. The realization crashed over me like ice water. This wasn't about Ivy's well-being. This was a setup. Darian had found a psychologist he was sleeping with and convinced her to lie under oath, to use her credentials, her professional authority, to destroy me. My hands were shaking. I wanted to scream, to jump up and tell the judge what I'd figured out. But I had no proof. Just a perfume and a feeling. That wouldn't hold up in court. It would make me look exactly as unstable as they were claiming I was. My lawyer started his cross-examination, but Dr. Torres had an answer for everything. Yes, she'd only met with Ivy 4 times, but that was sufficient for a preliminary evaluation. Yes, she'd only spoken to Darian about the family history, but mothers in these situations were often unreliable narrators. No, she didn't think her findings were biased. She was smooth, professional, credible. And she was lying through her teeth. The hearing adjourned for the day. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. Amber and vanilla. Dr. Camille Torres wasn't just destroying my credibility, she was sleeping with my husband while doing it. But knowing it and proving it were 2 different things. Ivy was spending the night with me. Darian's lawyer had agreed to continue our current split schedule until the judge made a final ruling. When I picked her up from school, she was quiet, withdrawn. She clutched her backpack against her chest like a shield. At home, she went straight to her room. I made her favorite dinner, mac and cheese with breadcrumb topping, but she barely touched it. After dinner, she asked if she could go to bed early. I pressed my hand to her forehead. No fever. She mumbled something about being tired, already turning toward the wall. As I closed her door, I heard it. A soft sob. My daughter was crying, trying to hide it from me. I stood in the hallway with my hand on the doorknob, wanting to go back in. But something told me she needed space. Whatever Darian had been saying to her, whatever pressure he'd been putting on her, she was carrying it alone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, researching Dr. Camille Torres. Her credentials were real. Duke PhD, licensed in North Carolina, publications in psychology journals. Nothing in her professional history suggested she'd commit perjury for a lover. But people do crazy things for love. Or money. Or both. I searched for any connection between her and Darian. Social media showed nothing. Her accounts were professional only, no personal posts. I tried searching both their names together. Nothing. Around 2 a.m, I went to check on Ivy. Her door was slightly open. In the dim glow of her nightlight, I could see her curled up in bed. But something was odd. She was clutching something against her chest. I stepped closer. It was her old tablet, the one with the cracked screen. Darian had bought her a new iPad 2 weeks ago, top of the line, But here she was, holding on to the broken one like it was precious. The next morning, Ivy was up before me. I found her at the kitchen table, the old tablet tucked into her backpack. I asked her why she still carried it around, reminded her about the new iPad. Her body went rigid, defensive. She insisted the old one worked fine. I didn't push, but I noticed she took it everywhere, to school, to the bathroom, even to the dinner table. At night, I heard her whispering to it, like she was recording something. 3 days later, Darian exercised his custody time. When he picked Ivy up, he noticed the old tablet in her bag. He questioned why she was still using that piece of junk when he'd bought her a new one. Ivy's voice turned sharp when she insisted on keeping it. Panicked, even. Darian's eyes narrowed, but he didn't argue. Not in front of me. That weekend, while Ivy was with her father, I did something I'm not proud of. I searched her room. I needed to understand what was happening with that tablet, why she was so attached to it. I found drawings hidden under her mattress, pictures of our family, but in every single one, Darian was crossed out with black marker, angry scribbles over his face. One drawing showed Ivy and me holding hands. Another showed a woman with dark hair standing next to Darian. Even a 9-year-old's drawing captured something cold about the woman's expression. Dr. Torres. Ivy had met her. More than met her. She knew something. My phone rang. Darian. He wanted to talk about Ivy's behavior. Told me she'd been disrespectful, distant. Said he tried to spend quality time with her, but she acted like she didn't want to be there. He suggested therapy. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so twisted. I mentioned she was just processing the divorce. He disagreed. Said his lawyer thought they should file for emergency custody, that this environment was damaging her. He hung up before I could respond. Emergency custody. They were going to try to take her away from me before the final hearing, before I had any chance to prove what they were doing. I had 4 days until the next court date. That night, Ivy came home from Darian's place earlier than expected. He dropped her off without coming to the door. She ran inside, went straight to her room, and I heard the lock click. 20 minutes later, she emerged. Her eyes were red from crying, but her jaw was set in determination I'd never seen before. She asked me a question. If someone did something really bad and I knew about it, would I tell? Even if it was someone in my family? My heart stopped. I asked what happened. She clarified. If someone was lying to hurt someone I loved, would I tell the truth even if it was scary? I knelt down so I was eye level with her. Told her yes, always. The truth is the most important thing, even when it's hard. She nodded slowly. Then she went back to her room with that old tablet clutched in her hands. I didn't know it then, but my daughter had been gathering evidence. While Darian thought she was asleep, while Dr. Torres thought she was just a confused child, Ivy had been recording everything on a device they'd forgotten about. She was building a case against her own father. The emergency custody hearing was set for Monday morning. Darian's lawyer had filed a motion claiming I was causing psychological harm to Ivy. Their evidence? Dr. Torres' testimony and a new declaration from Darian stating that Ivy had become anxious and withdrawn during my custody time. My lawyer called me Sunday night, warned me they were pushing hard. If the judge granted emergency custody, it would be almost impossible to reverse. I needed to be prepared. Prepared for what? Losing my daughter because my ex-husband and his mistress had orchestrated the perfect lie? That night, Ivy couldn't sleep. I heard her pacing in her room. Around midnight, I knocked softly on her door. She opened it. Her eyes were puffy, asked if she could come to court tomorrow. I hesitated. Court wasn't fun, and I didn't want her exposed to more trauma. She insisted, said she needed to be there. Something in her voice stopped me. I agreed. If she really wanted to. She hugged me tight, apologized for everything. I asked what she was sorry for, but she'd already pulled away, back into her room. Monday morning arrived too fast. I dressed Ivy in her favorite purple dress, the one my mother had bought her for her 9th birthday. She insisted on bringing her backpack. Inside, I knew, was that old tablet. The courtroom was cold. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Darian sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyer and Dr. Torres. She was wearing a cream-colored suit today, looking every bit the concerned professional. When she saw me, she smiled. Warm, sympathetic. I wanted to scream. Darian's lawyer presented their case, talked about how the situation had deteriorated significantly, how my instability was now manifesting in Ivy's behavior, how she'd become anxious, uncommunicative, showing signs of emotional distress. My lawyer objected. Where was the evidence? But they were ready. They called Darian to the stand. My ex-husband looked tired, concerned, like a devoted father at the end of his rope. He described Ivy's recent behavior. Nightmares, refusing to talk about what happened at my house, finding her crying in her room last week. When he'd asked what was wrong, she'd said she was scared, but wouldn't tell him of what. Lies. All lies. But he delivered them perfectly. Not overdramatic. Just a worried father sharing painful truths. The lawyer asked if Dr. Torres had observed these changes. Darian confirmed they'd had another session last week. Said Camille, Dr. Torres had confirmed that Ivy's anxiety had increased. First name basis. In open court. My lawyer caught it too, but before he could object, the judge moved on. Then Dr. Torres took the stand again. She'd prepared a new report. More session notes. More concerns about my emotional fragility and its impact on Ivy. The lawyer asked if the child was in danger. Not physical danger, Dr. Torres explained. But psychological harm was very real. Children Ivy's age needed stability. They needed to feel safe. Right now, I couldn't provide that. I watched her face as she spoke. The concerned expression, the professional demeanor, and underneath it all, I saw something else. Satisfaction. She was enjoying this. My hands clenched in my lap. I wanted to stand up and tell the judge she was a fraud, a liar, a woman destroying a family so she could steal someone else's husband. But I had no proof. My lawyer did his best in cross-examination, questioned the speed of her assessment, the limited number of sessions, the fact that she'd never actually observed me with Ivy. Dr. Torres had answers for everything. Suggested my attorney was grasping at straws, reminded everyone her credentials and methodology were sound. Sometimes the truth was simply uncomfortable. The judge was leaning toward granting emergency custody. I could see it in his face. He was about to speak when Ivy stood up. Everyone turned. My daughter stood in the gallery, her backpack clutched against her chest. The judge told her gently she needed to sit down. But Ivy said she needed to show him something. About Dr. Torres. Darian went pale. Dr. Torres' smile faltered for just a second. Darian's lawyer objected, said this wasn't appropriate. The judge disagreed, told the bailiff to bring her forward. My daughter walked to the judge's bench. She was trembling, but her voice was steady. Told him Dr. Torres had claimed to have 4 sessions with her, but she was lying. The judge looked concerned, reminded her that was a serious accusation. Ivy knew. She reached into her backpack and pulled out the old tablet with the cracked screen. Told him she'd recorded everything. On this. The courtroom went silent. Darian lunged forward, demanded she give him that device. The judge's voice cracked like a whip. Ordered him to sit down. Ivy's hands were shaking as she unlocked the tablet. Explained this was from 3 weeks ago, when Daddy thought she was asleep. She pressed play. The audio quality was poor, muffled, distant, but clear enough. Darian's voice came through first, complimenting Camille on her perfect performance that day, how the judge had believed every word. Dr. Torres laughed, reminded him her credentials would help. Nobody questioned a psychologist with a PhD and 15 years of experience. Then Darian's voice turned darker. Talked about when they finished this, and he had full custody, they could finally be together. Publicly, get married. The whole thing. Dr. Torres asked about me. Darian's response was cold. What about me? I'd have nothing? No daughter? No money? No house? He reminded her about the prenup, how his lawyer had built in clauses. Once he proved I was an unfit mother, he'd get everything. I'd be lucky if I got supervised visitation once a month. Dr. Torres' voice came softer then, asked about Ivy, if he was sure she wouldn't be a problem. Darian dismissed the concern, said she was 9. Kids adapt. In 6 months, she wouldn't even want to see me. He'd make sure of that. The courtroom was frozen. The bailiff had moved closer to the defense table. The judge's face had gone from curious to stone cold. Ivy stood there, tears streaming down her face, holding the tablet like a weapon. She whispered there was more. She scrolled through the recordings. There were dozens. Conversations between Darian and Dr. Torres planning her testimony. Text message screenshots, intimate messages between them going back 8 months. Photos of them together at restaurants, at a beach resort, at what looked like Dr. Torres' apartment. And the worst one, a voice memo dated 2 months before Darian filed for divorce. Darian's voice described moving money into an offshore account. Small amounts? Nothing I'd notice. By the time he filed, he'd have $200,000 secured. I wouldn't even know it was gone. Dr. Torres asked what if my lawyer found it. Darian wasn't worried. He'd hired the cheapest lawyer he could find for me, some overworked public defender who wouldn't have time to dig. And with her testimony about my mental state, no judge would question his financial declarations. The recording continued. Plans to fabricate evidence, Dr. Torres offering to create fake session notes, Darian describing how he'd taken photos of the house during the 1 week I'd been sick with the flu, waiting until it looked terrible to document it. He even admitted calling my mother and telling her not to visit. Had said I needed space, that I was isolated, depressed, and he'd made sure I stayed that way. The judge held up his hand, told everyone that was enough. His voice was ice. He looked at Darian, then at Dr. Torres, ordered the bailiff to detain them both immediately. Darian's lawyer was on his feet, but he looked sick. The judge wasn't having it. Told the lawyer to sit down. His client had just confessed to fraud, perjury, and conspiracy in a custody case. Dr. Torres had used her professional credentials to commit perjury in his courtroom. He turned to Ivy, asked how long she'd been recording these conversations. 2 months, she said quietly. Since she'd heard Daddy telling someone on the phone that Mama was going to lose her, she'd gotten scared. She knew Daddy had taken her new iPad and could see everything on it. But he'd forgotten about her old tablet. It still worked, just the screen was cracked. So she'd started recording at night when he thought she was asleep. The judge asked about the photos and messages. Ivy explained. When Daddy left his phone on the kitchen counter, she'd taken pictures with the tablet. And when that lady, she pointed at Dr. Torres, came to the house and they went into his office, she'd listened outside the door and recorded them planning what she'd say in court. My 9-year-old daughter, had been conducting an investigation while I was falling apart. The judge turned to Dr. Torres, asked if she had anything to say. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried to explain it was a misunderstanding, that those recordings were out of context. The judge wasn't buying it. His voice was sharp. She'd admitted on tape to fabricating psychological evaluations. She'd conspired with Darian to defraud this court and deprive a mother of custody through false testimony. He turned to the bailiff, ordered both of them taken into custody, said he was referring this case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Darian stood up, argued the recording was made without his knowledge, that it wasn't admissible. The judge shut him down fast. In a criminal trial, maybe he'd have an argument, but this was family court, and the judge had broad discretion. What he'd just heard was evidence of a conspiracy to commit fraud against this court and to deny me my parental rights through fabricated evidence and perjury. He asked Darian if he had any idea how serious this was. Bringing a fake expert witness? Darian interrupted, said she wasn't fake. Her credentials were real. The judge agreed. Her credentials were real. Her testimony was perjury. She'd never conducted legitimate sessions with his daughter. She'd lied under oath about her professional opinions to help him steal custody. That wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. Dr. Torres was crying now, her professional mask completely shattered. Started to plead that she didn't mean it. They were in love, she thought. The judge cut her off, told her she'd thought she could use her position of authority to help her lover destroy his ex-wife, that she'd violated every ethical standard of her profession. He looked at Ivy, said this child had shown more integrity in 2 months than either of them had shown in their entire lives. The bailiff approached Darian's table. Darian looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since this whole nightmare started. And in his eyes, I saw it. Not remorse. Fear. He'd lost, and he knew it. As they led him away in handcuffs, Dr. Torres following behind, Darian's lawyer stood frozen. Then, without a word, he picked up his briefcase and walked out of the courtroom. Just left. His client was being arrested, and he wanted nothing to do with it. The judge turned to me, granted me emergency full custody effective immediately, said we'd schedule a hearing to address the criminal charges and to reopen the entire divorce proceeding. He suspected once they dug into Darian's finances, they'd find a lot more than what was in these recordings. I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Ivy ran to me and I caught her in my arms. She was sobbing, apologizing, said she didn't tell me because she was scared, didn't know if it would work, didn't know if anyone would believe her. I whispered into her hair how brave she was. So brave. She pressed her face against my shoulder, told me she'd heard Daddy say I was going to lose her forever, that she couldn't let that happen. I was her mama. Her mama. The district attorney's office moved fast. By the end of that week, Darian and Dr. Camille Torres were both formally charged. Darian faced fraud, perjury, conspiracy to commit fraud, and financial crimes. Dr. Torres faced perjury, fraud, and misuse of professional credentials. Her psychology license was suspended immediately, pending a full ethics investigation. The state board didn't even wait for the criminal trial. The recordings Ivy had made were enough, but that was just the beginning. The judge ordered a complete forensic audit of Darian's finances. What they found was worse than I'd imagined. The offshore account he'd mentioned in the recording held $230,000. Money he'd siphoned from our joint accounts over 18 months, starting long before he'd even asked for divorce. Small transfers, carefully timed, designed to look like normal spending. He'd also taken a second mortgage on our house without telling me. $75,000 gone. Spent on Dr. Torres, vacations, jewelry, her apartment deposit. He'd forged my signature on the mortgage documents. My lawyer, I'd fired the public defender and hired someone competent with money from my parents, filed an emergency motion to freeze all of Darian's assets. The court granted it immediately. Meanwhile, the recordings kept revealing more. Ivy had captured over 40 hours of conversations. Most of it was mundane. Darian watching TV, talking on the phone about work. But scattered throughout were damning pieces of evidence. In one recording, Darian discussed manipulating Ivy. Talked about making her think staying with him was her idea, how kids that age were easy. Buy them what they want, tell them the other parent is the problem. She'd choose him on her own. In another, he discussed the fake spending charges on the credit cards. Admitted opening cards in my name. Just small ones, nothing I'd notice. Ran up some debt, made it look like I was shopping compulsively. It fit the unstable narrative perfectly. Identity theft. Another charge. Dr. Torres's recordings were just as bad. She'd bragged about her plan to other people. Apparently, she'd told her sister about the scheme. Talked about how he was going to leave me with nothing. Then they could finally be together without sneaking around. She was tired of being the secret girlfriend. The sister, horrified, had already contacted the DA's office to cooperate. By week 3, Darian's lawyer had withdrawn from the case. No explanation given, but everyone knew why. You can't defend the indefensible. Dr. Torres tried to negotiate a plea deal. Her lawyer argued she'd been manipulated by Darian, that she was a victim too. The DA wasn't buying it. The DA made it clear. She was a licensed psychologist who used her credentials to lie under oath in a custody case. She'd fabricated session notes, provided false expert testimony, and helped orchestrate a scheme to deprive a mother of her child. She knew exactly what she was doing. The plea offer was 5 years in prison and permanent loss of her professional license. She turned it down, thinking she could do better at trial. Bad decision. During this time, Ivy started therapy. Real therapy, with a court-appointed psychologist who specialized in children of divorce. Dr. Patel was kind, patient, and asked me before every session if I had questions. I asked after the 3rd session how Ivy was doing. Dr. Patel said she was remarkably resilient, but she'd been carrying a lot of weight. She'd felt responsible for holding the family together. When she realized she couldn't, she decided to gather evidence instead. It was an unusual coping mechanism for a 9-year-old. I asked if that was bad. Not bad, Dr. Patel explained. Just heartbreaking. She shouldn't have had to do that. No, she shouldn't have. At home, Ivy was different. Quieter. She'd wake up from nightmares about the trial, about Darian, about being taken away from me. I'd sit with her until she fell back asleep, and sometimes I'd cry after I left her room. My daughter had saved us, but the cost was her innocence. The divorce was reopened completely. Every financial declaration Darian had made was now suspect. Forensic accountants traced every dollar, every transfer, every hidden asset. They found more. Cryptocurrency accounts. A safe deposit box with $50,000 in cash. Retirement accounts he'd claimed didn't exist. Altogether, Darian had hidden nearly $400,000. My lawyer filed for full restitution, explained he'd committed fraud. I was entitled to half of everything, plus damages for what he'd put me through. But more than money, I wanted justice. 6 weeks after the hearing, the criminal trial began. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. They played the recordings in court. Ivy's voice, young, scared, explaining she was recording this because she needed proof. Then Darian's voice, cold and calculating, discussing how to destroy me. Dr. Torres took the stand in her own defense. Big mistake. The prosecutor tore her apart. Reminded her of her credentials, PhD in clinical psychology, state licensed, published research on child welfare, then asked how someone with that authority had decided to lie under oath about a 9-year-old girl's psychological state, how she'd fabricated session notes, how she'd provided false expert testimony, how she'd done this to help her lover win a custody battle. Dr. Torres tried to explain it wasn't like that. The prosecutor demanded she explain then. Tell the jury how a trained psychologist, an expert in child welfare, decided it was acceptable to use her professional credentials to destroy a family. She couldn't answer. She broke down crying on the stand. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Darian didn't even bother with a trial. After Dr. Torres was convicted, he took a plea deal, 3 years in prison, full financial restitution, and a permanent restraining order keeping him from contacting me except through lawyers. He could see Ivy, supervised visits only, and only after he completed a parenting course and psychological evaluation. The judge made it clear he didn't get to traumatize his daughter further. She'd decide when and if she wanted a relationship with him. Dr. Torres got 5 years. She'd serve at least 4 before parole eligibility. Her psychology license was permanently revoked. She'd never work in her field again. At the sentencing, she looked at me, apologized, said she never meant to hurt Ivy. I didn't respond, because she did mean to hurt Ivy. She just didn't expect Ivy to fight back. 3 months after Darian and Dr. Torres were sentenced, I stood in our house, my house now, and packed up the last of his belongings. The divorce had been finalized. I got full custody of Ivy, the house, and half of all marital assets, plus damages. That came to just over $350,000 once everything was divided and the hidden money recovered. Darian was in federal prison 2 hours away. He'd requested a visit with Ivy. Dr. Patel said the decision had to be Ivy's. My daughter sat at the kitchen table, considering it, asked if she'd have to go alone. I assured her no, I'd be there. And it would be supervised. A social worker would be in the room the whole time. She asked what if he tried to tell her he was sorry and he loved her. My heart broke a little more. Told her she could decide if she believed him, and she could decide if she wanted to forgive him. But she didn't have to do either of those things. She thought about it for a long time, eventually said not yet. Maybe someday, but not yet. I told her okay. She looked up at me, asked if that made her a bad daughter. I knelt beside her, told her no. It made her someone who was protecting herself. That wasn't bad. That was smart. She nodded, satisfied. The money from the settlement sat in an account, waiting. I didn't want to touch it at first. It felt tainted. Blood money. But my therapist, yes, I was seeing someone too, helped me reframe it. Reminded me it wasn't blood money. It was restitution. It was what I was owed all along. Darian had stolen from me, and now I was getting it back. So I used it. First, I paid off the house. No more mortgage, no more connection to Darian's fraud. Then I set up a college fund for Ivy, enough to cover 4 years at any school she wanted. The rest I invested in myself. I'd given up my photography career to be a full-time mom. I'd told myself it was temporary, that I'd go back to it someday. But someday had never come. Until now. I enrolled in a professional photography program. Commercial photography, portraits, event coverage, the kind of work that could support us long-term. I bought new equipment, built a portfolio website, and I started booking clients. Turns out, there's a market for a photographer who understands what it's like to rebuild your life. Divorce portraits, women capturing their new beginning, families in transition, people who needed someone behind the camera who understood what it meant to start over. Ivy went back to school. 4th grade. She'd missed a lot during the trial, and I worried she'd be behind. But her teachers were understanding. More than that, they were amazed at her strength. Her teacher told me during conferences she was a remarkable child, empathetic, mature beyond her years. The other kids looked up to her. She'd made friends. Real friends. Kids who knew what had happened, because of course everyone at school knew, but who didn't treat her differently because of it. One girl Madison had divorced parents, too. They bonded over their shared experience. But Ivy still had nightmares, still woke up sometimes crying, convinced she was going to lose me. Dr. Patel said it would take time. Trauma didn't disappear overnight. Dr. Patel explained during one of our joint sessions that Ivy had saved me. But now she needed to know I could save myself, that I was strong enough to protect both of us. So I showed her. I built a career. I maintained our home. I handled bills, fixed things when they broke, made decisions without second-guessing myself. I became the mother Ivy needed, not perfect but present, strong, reliable, and slowly the nightmares became less frequent. 6 months after the sentencing, Dr. Torres' sister reached out to me. Her name was Angela. She wanted to apologize. We met at a coffee shop. She looked exhausted, explained she should have done something sooner. When Camille told her what they were planning, she'd thought her sister was joking. Then she'd realized she was serious, and she'd been a coward. She didn't want to believe her sister could do something so cruel. I acknowledged that she came forward eventually. She shook her head, said only after she'd heard the recordings, after she'd realized what Camille had actually done. She was so sorry for what her sister did to me and Ivy. I told her she wasn't responsible for her sister's choices. She disagreed, said she was responsible for her silence. Then she slid an envelope across the table, explained this was from Camille. She'd wanted Angela to give it to me. Inside was a letter, Dr. Torres' handwriting, neat and controlled. The letter said she knew no apology would undo what she'd done, that she'd used her credentials, her position of trust to hurt me and my daughter, that she'd told herself she was in love, that Darian and she were meant to be together. She'd convinced herself I was the obstacle to their happiness. She'd been wrong about everything. She'd lost her career, her freedom, and her integrity. But I'd lost so much more. My sense of safety, my trust, my daughter's innocence. She didn't expect forgiveness, didn't deserve it. She was writing because I deserved to know she understood what she'd done. She understood, and she was sorry. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. Angela asked if I was going to write back. I said no. She asked if I forgave her. I thought about it, really thought about it. Told her I didn't know. Maybe someday. But right now, I was focusing on moving forward. Forgiveness would require me to look back, and I wasn't ready to do that yet. She nodded, said that was fair. After she left, I threw the letter away. A year after everything fell apart, Ivy's school held a mother-daughter event, breakfast and activities in the gym. I almost didn't go. Too many memories of the last time I'd been there, when Darian was still my husband and life was simpler. But Ivy wanted to go. So we went. The gym was decorated with streamers and balloons. Tables were set up with crafts, making picture frames, decorating journals, painting canvas bags. Ivy pulled me toward the picture frame station. She wanted to make one for us, for our new beginning. We decorated a frame together, purple and silver, her favorite colors. She wrote along the border about us being stronger together. When we finished, she hugged me, told me she was proud of us. I told her I was too. That night, I put the frame on my nightstand with a photo of the two of us from the event. Both of us smiling. Real smiles, not forced ones. We'd survived. More than that, we'd won. 2 years later, Ivy turned 11. We celebrated with a small party, her close friends, pizza, a cake shaped like a camera because she'd recently discovered she loved photography too. Turns out resilience runs in the family. She asked if she could use my good camera for her party photos. I told her absolutely. She documented everything, her friends laughing, blowing out candles, opening presents. When I looked through the photos later, I was struck by something. Every single shot was perfectly composed, centered, clear. My daughter had an eye for this. The photography business I'd built was thriving. I'd specialized in what I called transition photography, people going through major life changes, divorces, yes, but also career changes, new beginnings, people rediscovering themselves after loss. My website homepage had a simple tagline about capturing strength and transformation. Clients came from all over the state. Women mostly, but not always. People who'd read about my story. It had been covered in local news after the trial, and wanted someone who understood what it meant to rebuild. I hired an assistant, opened a small studio, started teaching weekend workshops on photography basics. Ivy sometimes came to the studio after school. She'd do homework in the corner while I edited photos. One afternoon, a client came in for her divorce portrait session. She was nervous, kept apologizing for being emotional. Ivy looked up from her math homework, told the woman it was okay to be sad about endings. But she was here for a new beginning. That was something to be happy about, too. The woman smiled through tears. Thanked her? After she left, I asked Ivy where she'd learned that. She said from me, that I'd taught her endings don't have to be the scary part. Sometimes they're just the start of something better. Dr. Patel had been right. Ivy was remarkably resilient. She still had moments of anxiety, especially around Father's Day or when friends talked about their dads. But she'd learned to talk about her feelings instead of hiding them. Darian had been released from prison after serving 2 years. He'd written to Ivy several times. She'd read the letters, but never responded. 6 months after his release, he'd requested supervised visitation again. This time, Ivy said yes. She explained she wanted to see if he was different, and if he wasn't, at least she'd know she tried. The first visit was awkward. Darian looked older. Prison had aged him. He tried too hard to connect with Ivy, asking questions about school, her interests. She answered politely but kept her distance. The social worker's report noted the child was cordial but guarded. Father appeared remorseful, but child maintained appropriate boundaries. After 3 visits, Ivy told me she didn't want to go anymore. She explained he kept saying he was sorry, but it didn't feel real. It felt like he was sorry he got caught, not sorry for what he did. I told her she didn't have to keep going if she didn't want to. She knew. And she didn't want to. Maybe when she was older, but not now. I informed Darian's lawyer. The visit stopped. He didn't fight it. Dr. Camille Torres was still in prison. She'd been denied parole after her first hearing. The parole board noted her lack of genuine remorse. She'd spent most of the hearing talking about how the conviction had ruined her life, not acknowledging the harm she'd caused. She'd served the full 5 years. I didn't think about her often anymore. Some people deserve to live in your past, not your present. On the 3rd anniversary of the trial, Ivy and I went to the courthouse. Not for any legal reason, just to see it, to remember. We stood in the parking lot where, 3 years earlier, I'd watched Darian and Dr. Torres led away in handcuffs, where my daughter had become the bravest person I'd ever known. I asked if she remembered being scared that day. She said she remembered being terrified, but she'd been more scared of losing me. That fear was bigger than anything else. I told her I was so sorry she had to go through that. She disagreed, said if she hadn't, we might not be here. I might have given up. She might have lost me anyway. She was right. The trial had been traumatic, but it had also been the catalyst for everything that came after. The career I'd built, the confidence I'd found, the relationship Ivy and I had now, honest, strong, unbreakable. That evening we had dinner at her favorite restaurant. Over dessert, she asked about something that had been on her mind. She wondered if I'd ever date again. I was surprised, told her I didn't know. Maybe someday. Asked why? She said because I deserved to be happy, and she didn't want me to be alone forever because of what Dad did. I reached across the table and took her hand, reminded her I wasn't alone. I had her. She knew, but she meant happy with someone, the way I used to be before everything fell apart. I squeezed her hand, told her I was happy. Maybe not in the way I was before, but in a better way, a stronger way. And if someday I met someone, that would be great. But I didn't need that to be complete. I already was. She squeezed back, said she was too. A few months later, I spoke at a women's empowerment event. The organizers had asked me to share my story, how I'd gone from nearly losing everything to rebuilding my life. I'd hesitated at first. Talking about it still hurt. But then I thought about all the women who might be in the same position I'd been in 3 years ago. Scared. Isolated. Convinced they had no options. So I accepted. Standing on that stage, looking out at 200 women, I told them everything. The betrayal, the manipulation, the moment I'd realized my ex-husband's expert witness was his mistress, and how my 9-year-old daughter had saved us both. I told them I'd learned something through all of this. Strength doesn't mean you don't break. It means you find a way to put yourself back together. Sometimes that strength comes from you. Sometimes it comes from the people who love you, and sometimes it comes from the least expected place. A child who refuses to let the adults in her life destroy her family. After the speech, women lined up to talk to me. Many were crying. Some shared their own stories of betrayal, of custody battles, of fighting to protect their children. One woman, maybe 30 years old, gripped my hand, explained she was in court next month. Her ex was trying the same thing, making her look unstable to get full custody. She'd been about to give up, but after hearing my story, she was going to fight. I told her good. Fight like hell and document everything. Everything. Driving home that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of pain. I still carried scars from what Darian and Dr. Torres had done. But peace in knowing that I'd survived. That Ivy had survived. That we'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to us and transformed it into something stronger. Ivy was at home when I got there, working on a school project. She looked up when I walked in, asked how it went. I told her good. Really good? She asked if I cried. A little, I admitted. She smiled. Asked if it was the good kind of crying. Yeah, I told her. The good kind. That night, tucking her into bed, yes, she still let me tuck her in sometimes. I asked her something I'd been wondering. Asked if she ever regretted doing what she did. Recording everything, bringing it to court. She thought about it. Said sometimes she wished it never had to happen. But no, she didn't regret it. I was her mom. She couldn't let him take me away from her. I reminded her she shouldn't have had to do that. That wasn't her responsibility. She knew. But she did it anyway. Because that's what family does. We protect each other. I kissed her forehead. Agreed. And we always will. Before I left her room, she called out to me, asked if I thought other kids going through this would hear our story. Maybe, I told her, asked why. She said she hoped they did. She hoped they knew they weren't alone, and that even when adults mess everything up, kids can be strong too. I told her they can. She proved that. She smiled and closed her eyes. In the hallway, I stopped and looked back at her. My daughter, my hero. The girl who'd saved us both with nothing but an old tablet and more courage than most adults ever find. She was right. Other kids would hear this story. Other mothers would hear it. And maybe, just maybe, it would help them find their own strength. Because that's what we do. We survive. We rebuild. We become stronger than we ever thought possible. And we do it together. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world where you needed to hear this story, drop a comment and let me know what city you're in. I'd love to know this message reached you. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. There are more stories like this. Stories of survival, strength, and new beginnings. Stories that remind us we're never as powerless as we think we are. Thank you for being here with me through this journey. Thank you for listening. And remember, you're stronger than you know.